Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor are the co-hosts of the podcast Awareness Explorers. Jonathan is the author of 12 books, including More Love, Less Conflict and Conversations with Dog, and has interviewed spiritual leaders such as the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Ram Dass, and Wayne Dyer. Brian is the author of Awareness Games, Playing with Your Mind to Create Joy, and is a formerly depressed guy who found the source of happiness through knowing himself as awareness. Beautiful bios from the two of you. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I'm going to mute and let you guys get started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noel.
Well, hi, friends out there. Brian and I have been doing a podcast called Awareness Explorers for about 2.5 years. And in it, we get an opportunity to get to know, interview people like Adyashanti, Byron Katie, Rupert Spira. And I've interviewed about 100 people, and Brian has come up with about 100 awareness games that get people to be aware of their true nature very quickly. And we thought that we would start by just saying what we personally have found useful. A lot of times people get into all kinds of theory and abstractions, but what do people like us who've been exposed to a lot of stuff actually do on a daily basis to connect with nothing? So we'll talk. We'll be giving methods to get into nothing. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. And I hope Noel, you'll, if possible, you can join us in on that conversation. But having talked to so many spiritual leaders, the thing that sometimes people ask me, what was it like talking to all these spiritual leaders? And I say, well, they each gave me very exact things that they do to connect with consciousness or God or their true nature, except all of them were different. So, what the Dalai Lama says is different than what Deepak Chopra says in terms of what they actually do on a daily basis. But over time, by experimenting, they came up with what worked for them. And so, Brian, I'm wondering, on a daily basis, what do you find works best for you?
That's exactly right. What works best for me, I'm going to get into more specifics, but in general, I just want to say that anything that's going to turn my attention around from the content of awareness to awareness itself, that's what in general I'm after, because pure awareness itself is already present, it's already allowing, it's already okay with everything that is, it's already loving. It is love, and that's where happiness lives, not in the stuff we can get or things we can achieve. But having said that, there's a whole bunch of different ways that I've tried to get there. For example, very, very quickly is just the simple thing is whenever something happens that whenever, like say, something I don't like happens or some emotion happens that's so-called, unwanted emotion, I'll just simply ask the question, what is experiencing this right now? In what is this all appearing? And it's not to get an answer, it's to shift back. But the tricky part is that I found is that if it doesn't work on any given day, then it's always for one of two reasons. Either you're trying to get rid of some feeling that you have that you don't want, or you're trying to create a state that you think you should have, either one you liked in the past or one you think you want in the future. And it is none of those things. It is simply wordlessly noticing awareness now.
That was well said. Before this call, I was talking to Brian, and I was feeling sad today, partly because of politics and some personal stuff. And I don't like sadness, Brian. I don't know about you, but it's not one of my favorite emotions, and I don't experience it a lot. So when it hits me, it's like, oh my God, sadness, this sucks. So I was using one of these methods, like what's this appearing in? But I was definitely using it to try and get rid of it.
Right.
And there's something about it, it's kind of like if you bake a cake and you let it, and you don't include just the smallest amount of yeast, you don't have a cake, you have a piece of matzah at the end of that, you know?
Uh-huh.
So sometimes just a slight change in how you use a method or the wording of a method, you know, like the method, who am I, that Ramana Maharshi gave people, never worked for me whatsoever. But the question, what am I, worked great.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I would say, what is this me? What is this, or just like, okay, I have a hand. Who's the I that has a hand?
Uh-huh.
My body. Who's the me? What does that my refer to? Is it the body? No, it's something that notices the body. What is that? And it's not an answer. I mean, the answer is a no thing. Speaking of the nothing conference, it is a no thing. It is indescribable in words, but it's delicious.
Yeah. And what's interesting, depending upon what method, and we're going to go into a bunch of methods, quick methods that we do, but depending on what method works best for you, it's natural to assume that that is the method, that is the method.
Yeah, right.
You know, if you find God while hopping on a foot on a Tuesday, you then think that's the best way to do it, and you're sure that that's going to work for someone else.
Yeah, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of Tuesday foot hoppingists and create a new religion.
Yeah, exactly. I have a method that very consistently gets me to a state of bliss in about 3 minutes.
Oh.
So when I first discovered this and it worked so well, I was like, a religious fanatic telling you got to do this, and I would teach it to friends, and they would go, "Yeah, that didn't do anything for me," and I soon learned that it's different strokes for different folks. But I like methods that take less than 10 seconds to quote do, because I can do them like I'm doing a method right now. And some people might know this method. It's called headlessness. We can't normally see our own head. So I look out kind of like my eyes are like a camera, and I see arms coming out of this big open space. And you don't have to do this method. It's actually how we see things. So just by looking out, it's kind of like there's something looking through this vehicle of a body, and that's something I call awareness. And there is no, in that very simple view of seeing arms and a body come out of this big view, there is no Jonathan I see, there's no head I see. And that kind of reminds me, like, the idea of a personality of a Jonathan is just a made up story from my past. Mm-hmm. And as I said, you actually have to do something to create this idea of a personality, because in the moment, it doesn't exist. You can't see it. You can't even see your own head. And it's kind of a relaxation into seeing just what is in that moment.
Yeah, it points to the space for experiencing.
Yeah, sometimes I use certain like phrases that help, like, I am space for the world.
Yeah.
Out of here comes the entire world, or everything is hanging in consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like a big picture in front of me.
We had a great conversation with Richard Lang about this on one of the episodes. I just loved it. I listened to it again recently. It was so good.
And what I like about him, the same thing I like about what you do, Brian, is he has like 25 different experiments to help people to experience this, quote, headlessness. Yeah. And they're all a little bit different, like some involve pointing, some involve moving. And once again, just a slight variation can create a difference. But you wrote the book on awareness games, and a lot of different ways of doing this. What do you actually do on a daily basis?
Oh, well, there's a couple that I really seem to keep gravitating to, that I really love. And I realize that, well, first of all, you have to relax. So I do some sort of just relaxation thing, just like sometimes I imagine they're little Pac-Man like creatures going through my body, eating tension and leaving relaxation in its wake. But once you're physically relaxed, you have to pretty much sort of allow things just for now to be as they are. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. And one of my favorite ways, I mean, you have to leave the thing that veils pure awareness the most is past and future. It's thinking about the past and imagining the future. And so I have this one that I call the circle of this. And this simply is what is appearing right now. In fact, sometimes I elaborate and call it now, here, this. Now, period, here, period, this, period. And in the circle of this, you sort of imagine that you're in a circle, and within this circle is this, and outside of the circle is everything else, past and future. And you just say, okay, how long can I stay in simply this? Which means noticing what's happening now in my body, in the environment, what's arising, without commenting on it. Once you comment, once you talk about it, it becomes past. Or once you imagine, it becomes future. And you just see how long you can do it. And if a thought about the past arises, you just say, okay, that's outside the circle. I'm just going to stay in the circle of this and just play with it. See how long you can stay in it. If it's a minute, cool. If you can stay in it for longer, really great. And if you get good at it, you can just say, okay, circle of this, boom, you're there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that.
How about you?
Well, I do, in the Buddhist tradition, they have an idea called noting, where you can note different things. You can note like what you're feeling, or you can note thinking or hearing or seeing or worrying or whatever. And it's a very well-known Buddhist method that never did anything for me. And as you know, I took a course called the Finder's Course,
Mm-hmm.
in which a guy named Jeffrey Martin interviewed 1,200 enlightened people to find out what got them to this higher state of consciousness. And he kept on hearing about this thing called noting, but when he asked them how they did it, they noticed that what they were noting was slightly different. And what they were noting was mostly their feelings, but every now and then they throw in anything that they were noting that they recognized were higher or was in the moment. So it might be, you would note, embarrassment, worry, but then they would note things like what awareness feels like to them. So they would say spaciousness, vastness, and then they might note again, scratching nose, and then peacefulness, timelessness, and go back and forth about every few seconds, and with a slight emphasis on these positive aspects of what awareness can feel like. Or it might be just hearing sounds, or enjoying movement of hands, or very much in the present, rather than things like worry or other types of thinking that get us in the past. And I noticed that that was a lot like the circle of this. And it's interesting that when you start to like tune to the peacefulness, maybe the bliss, maybe the relaxation, maybe the sense of timelessness of awareness, it develops momentum. And soon you're just like floating in that experience of awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it. And it can get you there really quickly. So that's something I'll do, because it kind of puts you in the timeline of the present. It's like the river of presence.
I like that, river of presence. It's great. The thing that I found, though, for me personally, that absolutely was the best way is something I call to really just know yourself as awareness, to get feel awareness itself, even though, of course, any word I say like feel awareness itself can't be true, because awareness isn't a thing. You can't see it, you can only be it. In fact, that's a mini game. You can't see it, you can only be it. Be awareness knowingly. But a great way to do it is something I call triangulation. And I call it triangulation because it involves 3 modes of experiencing. Hearing, body sensations, and thought. And so you just start by noticing what sounds are appearing right now. Just noticing what sounds are rising. Wind, somebody talking, air conditioner, birds. And you ask yourself, what is that field of awareness in which the sounds appear? Silent, open, clear field, like an empty music hall before the orchestra starts. Then you say, okay, what am I feeling in my body? What bodily sensations am I feeling? Is there a breeze on my skin? Do I feel my feet on the floor, or the weight of my body against the chair? And you ask, what is the space that is appearing in? What is the spacious, open, clear field of awareness in which that appears? You notice it, and then you ask, is it the same field of awareness that the sounds appear in? Or are they 2 different things? And I think you'll notice it's one field. The sounds are appearing, the body sensations are appearing. Then you notice thoughts are arising. And they come and they go, and they arise and they subside, and you ask yourself, what is the clear, empty field of awareness in which thoughts arise? And it's like shifting your attention from the writing on a whiteboard to the white itself. You're just asking that. And when you notice that, you ask the question again. Is this the same field of awareness in which the sounds appear? Is it the same field of awareness in which the body sensations appear, and thoughts? And all 3 appear in the same field of awareness. And then you just notice that, you step back, and you be that. You know that's your true nature. That's who you are. And it sounds like a long description, but you can do it in seconds once you get the hang of it.
Well, as you know, I took that great method that you had and shortened it into 2 words. In what?
I love it.
So, I see your face now. What's that in? It's in the computer, which is in what? In my awareness, and I always, the interesting thing is, once you have the sense of what awareness, quote, is like, then it's easier to get back there again and again. So you don't have to go through the hour-long Zazen meditation to get back to it. You can just find these little pointers, like, what's that in? I'm worrying about, the politics. What's the thoughts in? Oh, that's in awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hungry. What's that in? It's in my body. What's my body in? It's in awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice that once, in a lot of traditions, they will give you long meditations to do, or whatever, so that you have that initial experience. But once you kind of had that experience, you really just need to look for the triggers that work for you that take as short a period of time as possible.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I remember Locke Kelly used to say, small moments many times a day. And Stuart Schwartz, he referred to it as self. And he said self is always there. It's so utterly reliable and dependable. And I find that about pure awareness, which is the same as self in the Hindu term, not in the Buddhist term, but the universal self, the pure awareness in which all appears, it's just so reliable. It's so there. Once you've played around the well and fallen into it a few times, you can jump into it at will, and you can do it like that. It's just it's just kind of fun. And the best thing about it is that there isn't this idea, at least for me, this is what dropped away. Idea that there is now some future state, some enlightened state that I'm going to need to get to. And then once I'm there, I'm going to want to stay in it, and I'm going to be in it, because I don't have to, because awareness is there at the drop of a hat. It's like a water bottle that I always have with me, that's never empty, and that I can drink anytime I want. But I don't have to be constantly walking around drinking. I can live life. I can experience life. I can do stuff. I can use my brain to figure out things if I need to. I can practice my singing or learn math or whatever. But you know that anytime you need it, it's there.
Yep. That's it's one reliable thing. If you're
Yeah.
if you're awake and here, the awareness is there.
Yeah, that's right.
I wanted to share a story, and something you said about how this idea of a lot of people have that they're going to someday get to a higher consciousness by going through a very lengthy stepladder process. And 30 years ago, that was like the norm. Everybody thought that almost. And now that idea is really fading. People are starting to have the understanding that there is no enlightened future. You're either awake now or you're not. And I think that's a real breakthrough in how people look at this, that if you eliminate time, thinking that there's a future, you're either fully committed to this moment or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And we all get to choose how much energy and focus we put towards this moment versus the imagined future, our imagined enlightened self in the future, all those things. That's one idea. But another thing which I like is that you and I never really wake up. Awakeness wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
We get out of the way.
Right.
So in that way, our aim is to, or as Ram Dass said, his goal is to become a nobody.
Yeah, right. I know. It's like this Brian character has his likes and dislikes and stuff that he does, and his stuff that he's good at, stuff that he's bad at, his neuroses. They're all there. But just when you have a sense that that's not really who you are, because the awareness that experiences all that is just so much bigger and vast, and it's identical as yours. I mean, what's looking out through my eyes is the same as what's looking out through your eyes, and it's just a small step from there that it's all one awareness looking out through billions of eyes simultaneously. But the great thing is, you don't have to believe that's true as a concept. You just have to imagine it's true. You just have to play with it. What if what's looking out through my eyes was the entire universe? What would that be like? You don't have to believe it philosophically. You just have to play around with a what if imagination type game.
Yeah, I think like in your book, Awareness Games, that's a big breakthrough, that a lot of people, when they approach this, it's kind of heavy for them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's even a tightness, like I'm going to get my thoughts to shut the hell up.
I gotta control these thoughts.
Yeah, and to make it more of a game and a lightness, I think is more in the right direction.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite games, which I use, is when I'm feeling kind of resistant or I'm feeling out of sorts, I'll say, root for things to go the way that they're going.
Like it.
It's like an instant peace. You know, I haven't figured out a way to sell this technique, it seems like instant peace would be a really valuable thing to sell, you know?
Sure.
And so, you know, I have a course called Instant Peace, Guaranteed. And then it just has the technique, however things are going, root for it to go that way. And you
Yay.
can, yeah. So right now I'm rooting for total political chaos in America. And I am really rocking it.
Wow. Go team.
Well,
It's happening.
I tried the other method for a while, like not wanting any, you know, polarization, difficulty, chaos. And, you know, I would feel just how uptight that makes me. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
what if, and now, of course, I'm going to vote and do all those responsible
Oh,
things, but
sure.
what is it like to say, I'm going to root for the chaos to happen just as it happens?
Mhm.
And just kind of allow that. It really comes back to your allowing things as a prerequisite to being able to know yourself as awareness, because you can't know yourself as awareness and be resisting what is at the same time. Those two
Mhm.
things can't be in the same moment.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And
I
you don't
mean,
have to allow it for long, just for this moment.
yeah, that's true. Because a lot of people say, well, doesn't this make you passive and you don't, you don't act in the world and you aren't involved in the world? And I said, no, of course you can be involved in the world. But if just for now, just while you're playing this game or just while you're meditating, you allow whatever is arising to be exactly as it is, then you get into the habit of it. And while you're there, you realize that you're actually now vibrating in harmony with the universe. So that then later, when you decide that there may be some action that you need to take or that you can take or that will be effective, you do it. But you're doing it because you now have, well, you're vibrating much more in harmony with the universe, and for some mysterious way your actions become more effective, and I can't really explain it better than that.
Yeah. Well, I think you see more because you're not
Yeah.
taken by all your thoughts, by all your emotions, away from seeing what actually is. You know, I've asked a couple teachers, um, what if I suddenly had your state of consciousness, what would I notice would be different? And a common answer is that uh, you wouldn't be gaining anything. You'd be losing a bunch of stuff, which is causing you trouble.
Yeah. Yep. You're losing that
So
idea that what's happening shouldn't be happening.
that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
And we're being tested now.
Oh, all the time, all the time. And it's very tough. And but it's natural for us to have our feelings about what's happening. I mean, so it's not a matter of like, oh, we're not going to feel angry or upset ever again. No, it's a matter of when the anger comes, when it boils up, do you resist it? Do you tighten up against it and then it just sort of whirls around in an endless eddy inside you? Or do you loosen and soften and relax and allow it to come in, maybe flow around a little bit and flow out through you on the other side, flow out the other side after it just goes through you?
Yeah. What you resist persists.
Yeah, and that's the same way with being sad. I mean, we think that this is about never being sad again, but it's just amazing when you realize you can be happy when you're sad. It is such a paradox, I know. But these sad feelings come up and you go, oh my God, there's that sad feeling again. Where is it? Who notices it? Who's the I that feels sad? Or what else is happening now? Are there other things that I can include in my awareness that's happening now other than the sadness, sounds, body sensations, like I said before? And we become vaster, and that sadness just becomes a smaller part.
Yeah, it seems to be like the resistance to any emotion is really the thing that creates our difficulty. When you like totally melt into an emotion and you're fully present with it, it no longer even has the label of bad or good or negative or positive. It's just pure experience. And pure
Right.
experience is a great experience.
Pure experience, right? It is. It's all about pure experience, and instead we create a kind of virtual reality of our concepts about what's happening, and our idea of what should be happening, and our memories and our imagination of the future, and that's all virtual reality. But real direct experience is real reality, which is this: what is happening right now without conceptual description of it, just wordlessly. This is it, right here. And because awareness is already there, and because awareness is so okay with all of that stuff, because it already is allowing, we don't have to make ourselves allow something. We just notice what's already there that's allowing. And because it's the definition of love. And when you create like a little wormhole back through your thinking mind into the pure, vast awareness that you are, then that love can start like coming through you instead of a one-way flow all the way back. It just can permeate your lives.
Yeah, yeah. Ram Dass, the last time I talked to him, which was a few years ago before he died, I asked him what his practice is, and he said, it's now just one practice, and that is, he says, I am loving awareness. And he identifies not with Ram Dass, who is old and sick and has his quirks. He says, I am loving awareness, and I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I'm
that
sure
shift.
people might have questions, and we love questions. If people have any questions, we would love to hear them.
Okay.
Is now a good time for that? No?
Perfect. Yeah, and by the way, you got the whole or half the Nothing conference team cracking up over here. We're loving you guys.
Oh,
Loving the banter. Okay, so we'll start with Norman's. Does eternity move?
wow, that's deep.
You want to take it, Brian?
I don't know whether eternity I mean, what would move? I mean, I think can't. I think isn't move. Can't something move only relative to something else? How can everything move? So, at the risk of being conceptual, I'd say no. What do you think?
Well, I think you can come up with a conceptual answer, but I like the question, does eternity move? Triggers in me, no, eternity's always here. And awareness is always here. It's almost like a technique. If you ask that question, like, who
Yeah,
am I? Does
yeah,
eternity move? That reminds me that it doesn't, that now is all we ever experience, which is eternity. And this is a reminder that it's never in movement, it's always now.
and could you imagine yourself being unmoving eternity?
Sounds good to me. Yes.
So Norman asked a question and created a pointer. That's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. Who was the most fascinating person or interesting person that you've interviewed, and why?
Well, there's the people who I've interviewed on Awareness Explorers, which were like, uh, I think Brian and I are both big fans of adyashanti, so we really loved interviewing him. But prior, I interviewed a lot of people, including the Dalai Lama, Ram Dass, Mother Teresa, Deepak Chopra. But it ends up I really connected with Wayne Dyer. He's gone now as well, but uh, he was just a really kind person and was very supportive. And he actually bought the rights to my book because he said it gave a book called The Experience of God. He said it really gave so much good instruction. And when people are famous, you don't always know if they're really like sincere or not. And I just found him to be a great explorer and also a very humble person. So I really enjoyed my time with him.
That's a great answer. Brian?
Oh, gee, I was hoping I could let Jonathan get away with answering that whole question, because now I have to, like, I hate picking favorites. You know.
Well, it doesn't have to be favorite, just maybe most interesting.
Well, I tell you
I
what,
saw you cowering in the corner over there. That's why I picked it.
well, you know, I do remember one thing happening when talking to Byron Katie. Um, I found that sometimes what she was saying was not as easy to understand as I've seen her in, you know, because I've seen her give her presentations herself. But when we were talking to her, she went, but man, did I feel this love, this loving connection while just sitting there and listening, that she could have been talking gibberish, and I don't know why. I just felt this intense love while listening to her. So that was an interesting one.
She has a powerful transmission.
Yeah.
Good
Excellent.
question.
Thank you. So I got another question here. I just want to say I think it's got another one that just popped up, but I like the title of your podcast, Awareness Explorers, and when we put this together, we really try to, and I said this at the beginning of the day, try to get all these different flavors of non-duality, talking about what is, you know, whatever, and it's fascinating to me that there's just so many different viewpoints that are coming in, and so I just wanted to comment on that. I really enjoy what you guys do, and this watching you two talk has been great so far. But let's get to some other questions here. Can Jonathan say something about his years of using Justin tools versus non-duality? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I had a teacher for 26 years named Justin Gold, and he has a website. I think it's justingold.net. And this teacher was less focused on non-duality and more focused on seeing the obstacles you have to our true nature. So it's like a different, you know, there's different paths. You can focus on some of these techniques we've been talking about, where you're focusing on non-duality. You're focusing on it's all in awareness. And I think that's like one wing of a plane. The other wing of the plane is what's in the way. Because if you just relax and let go of all your mental stuff, you are awareness. So he focused on what's in the way, and that was really useful. So to me, it was like two wings of a plane, and has helped me stay on the right path, I think. Because if you just focus on awareness, but you don't know that you're sometimes a jerk, that can run into problems. Or if you just focus on how you're a jerk and you don't focus on how you're also innocent awareness, that can run into problems. So I think the two go hand in hand well. And it's a shame that not many teachers or people can teach you about how to know yourself, in Socrates' term, how to know when you're coming from a motivation that's impure or hurtful, all the stupid things we do, you know, and that you not get so identified with your personality. That can be a very helpful thing. So I think they go well together. They're just coming from different angles.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've been pleased, you know, obviously we didn't tell anybody coming to say anything in particular, but it's been refreshing actually to see so many talks about the human experience after, you know, and I know that in some cases for seekers that can be frustrating. They're like, yeah, okay, fine, everything you're saying about after, get me there, you know, and that's understandable. And on that note, I do have a question about getting there. So we'll start with that. But what piece of advice would you say helped you awaken the most?
It's already here. I don't think I could say it better than that. And more than one teacher said that. I mean, from Ramana Maharshi to Stuart Schwartz to Ajit to Locke Kelly to Rupert Spira, it isn't something you get. It's something that's already here.
Well, that's such a good answer that I hate to give mine, but let's see.
Give it a
Um,
shot.
I'll give it a shot. Something that someone said to me, Wayne Dyer said, is that you have to um, keep exploring to find what works for you. And he said, just because one teacher didn't work didn't mean that the next one or the next method doesn't work. So Brian and I always end our podcast with the words, keep exploring. And even though I have methods that work really well, being willing to be open to new stuff, new information, new things I'm trying is always part of the formula for me.
That's great. Thank you guys for that. I'm just going to keep firing questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
We love
We
it.
get 2 answers for each question. It's great.
Aha.
Um,
Two.
yeah, there you go. It's the everything stage. Would you say understanding leads to freedom?
Depends on what you mean by understanding. If you're talking about a conceptual understanding, a mind-based understanding, I think you can get stuck there pretty easily. You really have to, it really is more experiential. You have to try, you have to look, you have to do that turnaround to look inside and that half step back and see what it's like to be it. But understanding can be a first step to asking the questions. But it's just like with questions. So many of our, Jonathan's and my practices, awareness games, awareness practices are based on questions. And it's never to get the answer to the question. The asking of the question triggers that little turnaround, that little shift. And that's what's important.
The only thing I'll add is that I think it depends on the person. That some people, especially starting out, it's helpful to have understanding. But I think after a certain point, it's like eating a pizza. If you're hungry, the first couple of pieces is really great, but the 17th piece of pizza is not. It just gets in the way of you feeling good. So I think understanding is very useful towards the beginning of one's journey, and then it's really about a practice that works for you that's non-conceptual.
Yeah.
Great. So in your experience, is there a difference between awareness and consciousness? And if yes or no, explain a little bit more about that.
Mind if I just take a crack at this?
Please.
In one way of looking at it, I think they're the same, consciousness and awareness. The problem is that in everyday language, we use the word consciousness to mean something like that which goes away when we're under anesthesia, or that which goes away when we're in deep sleep. And I'm talking about awareness which is always present, even in deep sleep. I mean, if awareness was not there in deep sleep, you couldn't shake me and wake me up, but you can. So sometimes there's a confusion because we don't know which consciousness we're talking about. The regular medical term or the vast, universal, empty, spacious eternity in which all things appear. And if that's what we're talking about, then yes, that and awareness are the same.
I think it's important that people define their terms when they're trying to do this. And to me, I probably could come up with similar different definitions. It's really a matter, the way I look at it is it useful for you to delineate those two things? And if so, why? I personally don't find it useful to delineate those two things, so I don't, but I think you can certainly come up with different definitions. I know certain teachers have, and it's part of their teaching, but I'm more of a, actually, I just want to feel peace kind of guy. And so I don't spend that much time trying to define those things.
Great. Thank you for those. I know you guys, on your podcast, you bring on guests and you interview people all the time. I'm going to ask you to turn a question that you ask them back on yourselves. What's what sort of a go-to that you always have, or something that's one of your favorites to ask your guests? And let's hear your responses to it.
Please go first, Brian.
Well, I am always curious about the separate self. Because a lot of teachers talk about the separate self, and some say it doesn't exist, some say it's an illusion. And this topic fascinates me, and I always am curious about what other people have to say about it. So I usually ask a question that's somehow related to the illusion of the separate self and see what they have to say.
Mm-hmm. The most common question I'm curious about is what method has been most useful for them. And we talked about that earlier in our session. I talked about headlessness and subtle noting and certain questions like in what. But I'm always curious as to what method they have that can be done in under 5 seconds. Because that's a delineation, we're walking from here to there, where, we don't spend most of our day meditating. So if you have a method that actually is useful to you and it can be done in under 5 seconds or under 2 seconds, I'm always like, yeah, give me that one.
Yeah, it sounds like Brian has a whole book of those, right?
He does.
Well, and so that kind of leads the Brian, your answer leads to another question, but is in some of these cases, it almost feels like a loaded question, but identifying with awareness and not the person. This is the final understanding?
Yeah, I think you could definitely say that. It's that shift of identity. You're just from that sort of localized body mind, which is all about past and future and thought and stuff, into the spaciousness, the universal awareness. So yeah, I think the way you said it actually better. I think I just sort of like complicated it. It's real simple.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, I am pure, empty, choiceless awareness, not all the other stuff I think I am.
Beautifully said. So, so there's been sort of there's some thematic questions that have come up, and so one I want to ask is just generally speaking, and I don't know if you've spoken about it on your show, but about relationships. And I've been asking this of some other speakers, not even something specific, but I think that it seems as if there is, not even necessarily in romantic or intimate relationships, but just this idea of interacting with others with this understanding. And in some cases, it might be they have an understanding of this, but I'm guessing in most cases that they don't know about this. It's people asking questions about dealing with, religious family members or something like that. What comes up for you when we talk about relationships and non-duality and what is? Do I have to, let me ask you to unmute.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, Noel. We actually have a full Awareness Explorers podcast dedicated to relationships. I don't know what number, I think it's called the Yoga Relationships. And we have one dedicated to how do you talk about this stuff without turning people off? I think it's called How Do You Talk About This Stuff? And I've been very good at that. I think it involves really keeping your curiosity alive and asking people, what's your belief about that? Why do you believe that? That's very interesting. Once you give people a chance to share what's true to them, then they are more willing to be open to what is true for you, and then possibly have an exploration about it. And we give a bunch of pointers in that episode called How to Talk About This Stuff. I think it's really important that we do that. I was on the Oprah show once in which she took questions from a book I have called The Little Book of Big Questions. And instead of exploring the questions, people in the audience started to actually argue about them. And they actually had to call out security guards and drag people away who were like kicking and screaming. And I think it's such a shame. You see that in our politics now, that we're not necessarily able to hear each other and listen and explore. And one of the things I like about Awareness Explorers is sometimes Brian and I don't agree, but in our exploration, we both learn new things. And I like how in your conference, people can present different views, and hopefully you learn. And but allowing somebody else to express first and asking them questions is probably the best way to get them interested in hearing your experience and your ideas.
Sorry, my fault. I had to cough earlier, so I muted myself, and I forgot that only the host can say it's okay to unmute, which makes sense with so
Noel
many
has the
people
power.
coming on. Noel has the power. Anyway, great answer, Jonathan. I don't really have much to add to that.
Okay, so let's see if we got time for two more. What books can you recommend, or do you love the most?
Oh, that's a nice, easy one. We're going to have to go through our list of 1,000 now. Well, Brian would never say this, so I will say it for him. I really liked his book, Awareness Games, because it had so many very simple, practical, and really powerful techniques. Eckhart Tolle's great. I mean, we're blessed with an embarrassment of riches. I did do a book where I interviewed a bunch of people called The Experience of God, and you get, like Mother Teresa, Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra all answering. I think that can be helpful. I'll leave it at that for now. Brian?
Yeah, I think that Emptiness Dancing by Adyashanti is absolutely one of my favorites. I think it's beautiful. But I've certainly read a lot of books, and I think they're wonderful. I loved Shift into Freedom by Locke Kelly, and Surfing Your Inner Sea by, let's see, it's on my bookshelf here, Kushner. And but there was just, mind if I just sort of shift this answer just a tiny bit. Something happened when we all have so many books about enlightenment, about consciousness, about awakening, about spirituality. And I live half a block away from one of the biggest spiritual bookstores in Manhattan on 14th Street. And I used to spend so much time in there, and I would buy books and bring them home. And then one time I walked into that bookstore and I was overcome with this feeling that, oh my gosh, I'm not going to learn anything new from any of these books that I don't already know. And this joyful, bubbly, silly feeling went over me. So now one of my practices is to walk into bookstores so I can get that feeling.
Of course, you do have a bunch of books behind you, and so do I. So anything we say is not credible in this department. But
that's right. Yeah, I've got.
But yeah, books, some books can take you
When
far.
Fear Falls Away, right there by Jan Fraser. Sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Sometimes books work for you, sometimes they don't, depending upon where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true. So we have about 3 minutes left, and I hate to do this to you, but I'm curious. Lots of people want to know, how did you do it? And I think that's a good answer. What's these stories that I find interesting is what led you to start exploring this in the first place? What was the origin story of the curiosity that got you, that led you to ultimately finding non-duality, or however you want to phrase it, but this?
Well, I've done a lot of workshops and asked people that question, and it really comes down to, and I think I had all of them. I was very unhappy, so suffering will help motivate you. Psychedelics help. Facing your mortality helps. Those are the three big ones and then knowing or meeting somebody who represents that, all those things can really be useful on the path. How about you, Brian?
I was very depressed and desperate to find my way out of it, and I tried everything from from psychology and the codependence workshops to Sedona method to NLP to ritual magic, whatever. And I realized that the reason that I was looking for all these things is that I wanted to change myself, because I thought there was something deeply wrong with me. And when I realized when I dropped trying to change myself, and then at the same time found self-inquiry, starting originally from Ramana Maharshi, and then all the people from Papaji down the line that teach in a similar vein. When I learned that and then started doing self-inquiry and making up my own ways of doing self-inquiry while allowing myself to just to be as I am, I think that was the magic combination. That learn self-inquiry, which was originally taught to me by Stuart Schwartz, and beautifully so, and allowing myself and stop trying to fix myself.
Beautiful answers. Thank you guys so much. Well, I wanted to say how this has been amazing. This is the end of 2 12-hour days, and I've just been giggling. I know everyone on the team is exhausted, but this has been absolutely amazing and really energizing. So thank you so much for being here.